Welcome to feeling isolated, yet surprisingly calm and confident, which seems like such a contradiction. And that's why we're calling it a real skill workshop, because to have our primitive brain say, I'm isolated, and yet be able to calm ourselves and confidence ourselves so that our state of being can hold both or even start shifting over to a place where, yes, and I'm feeling okay. And even um, we're going to touch on ways that we can take, go from feeling that, of isolation to a place of okay, to maybe even being able to feel the connection that we have experienced even when profoundly isolated at times.
Yeah.
I'm Rick from Thriving Now. I'm here co-creating with Cathy Bartuli from the Intimacy Dojo and Thriving Now. Cathy, thank you for being here.
I think
Um,
thanks for inviting me. I think this topic is so important.
could you
All of
speak up
us.
just a little because I'm
Oh, yep.
having a
I
hard
can move
time?
it back over, and then I have a little shadow, but you get one or the other right now,
Okay, good.
because of the way the sun's shining and stuff. Um, yeah, I think this is so important because honestly, no matter how careful we are or how close we are with people, there's going to be times when we feel alone. And our survival brain does not like that. It associate we've evolved. When we were alone, we were much more likely to get eaten by hyenas or lions or fall in a crevice and no one ever found us again. And so our survival brain's like, no, alone is bad. Alone is scary. And yet some of the most profound insights I've had and the most I don't know, fulfilling moments I've had have been when I've been calmly alone in solitude. So I think that there's a balance. Can we help our survival brain realize we're actually quite safe? We're safer than we realize. And can we mind the experience? I like to, we bad things, things don't that are not pleasant happen. Can we go into the experience and take the gold out of it and really help our lives be much more rich and fulfilling as we go forward from our insights?
So the Thriving Now community includes thousands of people, and many of them, honestly, I know are pretty hunkered down. Like the the last 2 years, 2 weeks to flatten the curve has become 2 years plus to that have really impacted sensitive folk like myself. Um, and I first want to acknowledge that if you're here live or listening to the replay, really appreciate you and your courage and your willingness to explore this. I believe that as people emerge from wherever they are, hunkered down, coping, that the work that we're going to do today in this workshop, we're recording it so that wherever someone is in their journey, if if this appeals to them in the future, that they'll have access to it. I believe that we're storing up things um, for our future selves and our future community in doing this work. So just wanted to acknowledge that there are a lot of folks out there that can't even look at this. It's just too much
Well, and we
right now.
intentionally did. Omicron is going back up just when the numbers were looking nice. Now they're going this way. Not sure what that means yet, but we're also going into the holidays. And on both years when I was going to spend time with my family, who I love dearly, but we're like I was like a kitten raised in a family of ducks, and years when I didn't have people to hang out with, the isolation felt much more intense when we have a society going on about how we're supposed to be all around the kitchen table baking cookies and laughing and loving each other and not, arguing about who should be president or, like, we're supposed to have this, we have this picture that we're constantly fed, this media ideal of Christmas and or whatever holiday you celebrate. There's a lot of holidays around here, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa. I think there's a lot of social pressure. And I know that around these times, sometimes it's the most isolated that I feel. Is even when I'm with people, it's that feeling of I'm not doing this right. Society says it should look different, and I'm not even close. So obviously, it's there's something wrong. And in fact, my birthday and Christmas are near each other, so I will purposely I make two piles of presents. Like everyone I've been sending presents to is opening them right away. And like, oh, this is so fun. I'm like, I got your present, but it's in the birthday pile or the Christmas pile, and so on that day I'll have something to open. Because for me to wake up and have no like the presents are already opened, it just I feel very alone sometimes. So
Mhm.
it's things we can discover about ourselves and how to nurture ourselves through these days.
So you reflected a thought that I know is part of this dynamic of isolation. I must not be doing something right.
Yeah.
Um, for those of you that have been doing this work for a while, you've probably heard us talk about the primitive brain, but I just want to briefly mention something about it. Um, we have different layers in our brain, um, and one of those layers that gets first crack, very knee-jerk reaction. So like if somebody actually like strikes your knee in the right place and your leg kicks out, that's a knee-jerk reaction, the actual one. But everything
You
But
can't
everything
stop it.
else, yeah, you can't. It's actually loops through your spine and back to your knee. Well, we have sensors for things like suddenly feeling isolated. And isolated does not mean only you're by yourself. So, like, um, you can be a story that I remember is that uh, one of my heart adopted boy, he had such a need to not be isolated that if you wanted him to follow you, all you had to do was just start moving away. So, like, his sensor, even if he was like really wanting to tear all the cans off the shelf in the grocery store, if you took a few steps away from him, his primitive brain would pick it up and start following when he was young. And that is to me a testimony that this child was born with sensors related to isolation, which is still true, that he can sense when people are moving away from him without even necessarily being like visually or auditorily aware. Isn't that interesting? And if he does, and I start looking at that, I said, I do too. Like, um, the primitive brain has sensors. A lot of times we've talked about, or people have talked about extrasensory perceptions. A lot of those are in the gut, in your skin, the vibrational sensors that are like that can pick up things that are happening. And so your primitive brain was designed to keep you in connection and to keep you connected to people that are on your side, that are part of your tribe. And so if you're amongst strangers, that kind of stranger danger kind of feeling can kick it off. If suddenly the people in your home start feeling like strangers or that like they're moving away from you, guess what? That same part of you, top of the top of the neck, um, protected underneath the bony prominence of your occiput, um, that's where it is in the physical brain, but it extends throughout every part of you. So when we talk about primitive brain, we're talking about that gut feeling, the intuition, and just like the strike of the knee, when these feelings hit, press the button, trigger, um, it can make us feel like, uh-oh, and that can happen just all of a sudden.
Yeah.
You're making tea, and all of a sudden it strikes you. I feel I'm feeling isolated. Now, Cathy and us in the community, we use a tool called EFT tapping. It taps on meridian points. These are also used in acupuncture and acupressure. These are natural comfort points. Um, known for thousands of years. The primitive brain is 100,000 years or more. And you can trace it all the way back to our, the lizard brain, the monkey mind, and other parts. Um, but these natural comfort points have been known for a long time, and we use them in a way of gently tapping on them. When we're activated and then we're in a reaction, this can often offer really surprising help. If you're not familiar with EFT tapping, we have a free guide at thrivingnow.com/tapping. Um, our chat is open, and also if you're watching the replay, there's a place to reply or comment. Please feel free. Cathy and I pay attention, as do other members of our community. And so as we go forward, we welcome your ahas, your wisdom. We believe in shared wisdom. This is taking things that we've experienced and heard and worked with other clients, and we want to have an opportunity to circulate this approach in our community, develop more skill.
Yeah.
So,
And I just please acknowledge yourself if you're here. This is a really tough topic in a really tough several years around a tough time of the year. The fact that you're here trying to learn skills around this or just even getting a conscious understanding of what's happening will give you power going forward for the rest of your life.
yeah.
That just even getting when our conscious brain understands what's happening, we're not at the whim of like I know that sometimes I'll get triggered about something and I'll just be like I'm like what's happening? Why am I reacting this way? I'm going like what is this? And as soon as my brain goes, "Oh, I feel alone. I think the hyenas are going to get me even though I'm in my very safe home with enough food in the cupboard for several months." Like um it's I don't need to panic, but my conscious brain has to know what's happening to kind of help steer the survival brain. So the work you're doing here, the conscious thoughts you're getting, and the tapping we're going to do, will give you that leverage in the future to be able to take care of yourself better, and
Mhm.
that's very powerful.
So we'll start with some tapping around what Cathy had brought up. Like, oh, I'm having this reaction, and our other parts of our mind go, oh, I must not be doing this right. Whatever this is, if you find yourself isolated, you must not be doing it right. How true does that feel to you? Like, to me, that weirdly has this, like, yeah, I must not be doing it right. If I'm isolated, I must not be doing it right. That's like an eight. Um, so it, you can say it, you can kind of try it on yourself. If you remember a feeling of being isolated, whether it's really alive in you right now or not, um, what's your reaction? Is it that I must not be doing this right? How true does it feel? We can use a scale 0 to 10. Um, 10 is like, oh, that feels really true. 1 or 2, it's like, no, that's not really it for me. You can still tap along and solidify that, no, I'm not actually doing something wrong. Would you like to lead us?
I,
10. Yeah,
yeah,
thank you in the chat.
I'd
Uh,
be glad to. And I want to just point out that there's two things probably. There could be many things happening, but there's two things for sure happening. Our survival brain is trying to give us guidance to what we need. We do need connection with other humans to live a fulfilling life in general, unless we're a very odd person, like someone who wants to be a solitary monk. Great, please do that. I would be miserable. So there's actual we're safer and more fulfilled if we are guided towards that connection. And so there's the survival brain part, and there's also our society that kind of is like, you should feel good all the time. You should be working real hard. You should never feel down. If you feel sad, there's something wrong. So there's two things going on. Survival brain, great to pay attention to, calm down. Society, media pressure, it's okay to say, you know what? That's not true. Humans feel sad sometimes. I'm not failing if I feel sad. So I just like to invite you to if you want to get in your body, if that feels good for you, let yourself notice that your chair is supporting your butt, your feet are on the floor, and just wiggle your toes. Let yourself kind of sink in your body a little bit if that feels okay. And take a gentle breath. And even if you don't want to be in your body right now, it's okay. Just notice that. Just be with the resistance to that and don't try to force it. Karate chop. Even though there's something wrong,
Even though there must be something wrong.
I should not feel this way.
I should not feel this way.
They tell me that.
They tell me that.
Whenever I watch the Hallmark Channel,
Whenever I watch the Hallmark Channel,
they always are in love.
they're always in love and surrounded by people who are, yeah,
They're surrounded with people who get them.
yeah, they're not isolated.
And I think there's something wrong with me
And I'm convinced that there's something wrong with me
if I'm not connected.
if I'm not connected.
Top of the head, I don't want there to be something wrong with me.
I don't want there to be something wrong with me.
Eyebrow, how can I fix this?
How can I fix this?
Side of the eye, I've been trying to figure out how to fit in since I was little.
I've been trying to figure out how to fit in since I was little.
Under the eye, what if I just accepted I am me?
What if I just accepted I am me
Under the nose, and I can be there for me.
and I can be there for me?
Chin, and there's over 7 billion people in the world.
And there's over 7 billion people in the world.
Collarbone, there are some of them gonna like who I am.
And some of them are going to like who I am.
Under the eye, what if there isn't anything wrong with me?
What if there isn't anything wrong with me right now?
Top of that is just a feeling,
It is definitely a feeling,
and it's giving me direction on how to move.
and it's giving me direction on how to move. Maybe.
Yeah, take a breath. I think sometimes we interpret it differently than it might mean, but often it's like, I one of the ways Rick and I talk about connection is it's kind of a nutrient. So humans, we like it for survival, like those primitive brains, like, oh, must have protection against hyenas. When I hear a noise in the back of the backyard and I'm home alone, I'm like, oh crap. It's one reason I had a cat for a long time. But it's also a nutrient. Like, I think most of us feel more fulfilled when there's some connection. So if I'm low on vitamin C, I want my body to say there's something wrong. If I'm low on connection, if I'm not getting those gentle, fulfilling moments from with other people, okay, how can I get some of that nutrient? How can I can get some of that, like whether it's zooming with somebody or, and maybe I won't get the dose, the full dose in the form I would like right now because of COVID, or maybe I'm far away from people. But there are ways I can start getting a little more vitamin C for connection. I can, chat with my neighbor across the fence or meet with some friends for coffee or whatever that is.
Yeah. I'd like to go back directly to the I'm not doing this right, that feeling, because it moved a little with your tapping, but I'd like to go. So when you
Deeper.
feel isolated, where do you feel it in your body? If you know, sometimes people just sort of check out. For me, I get this kind of tension across up in here. My breathing gets shallow, like, uh-oh. There's an uh-oh kind of noise in my head. I like to tap on that, um, even though I have this feeling of being isolated.
Even though I have this feeling of being isolated.
Uh-oh.
Uh oh.
Uh, and a part of me is convinced
And a part of me is convinced
I'm not doing this right.
I'm not doing this right.
I'm open to being surprisingly calm and confident anyway,
I am open to being surprisingly calm and confident anyway.
even though this feeling really gets my attention.
Even though this feeling really gets my attention.
And I've just tried to cope
And I've just tried to cope
or distract myself
or distract myself
and not really feel it.
and not really feel it.
I do feel it.
I do feel it.
And I'm inviting my body to be surprisingly calm and confident
And
anyway.
I'm inviting my body to be surprisingly calm and confident anyway.
Up the head. I'm not doing this right.
I'm not doing this right.
Am I?
Am I?
Eyebrow. Should I ever feel isolated?
Should I ever feel isolated?
Side of the eye. This feels scary.
This feels scary.
Under the eye. Of course it feels scary.
Of course, it feels scary.
On the nose. My primitive brain is tens of thousands of years old.
My primitive brain is tens of thousands of years old.
It doesn't understand Zoom.
It does not understand
Come on. It
Zoom.
doesn't understand text messages
It doesn't understand text messages.
under the arm. It doesn't even understand spiritual connection.
It doesn't even understand spiritual connection.
That it needs to survive.
It needs to survive.
And I'm open to feeling a bit more calm and confident.
And I'm open to feeling a bit more calm and confident.
Eyebrow. What if I'm not doing anything wrong?
What if I'm not doing anything wrong?
Side of the eye. What if I'm not doing anything that is unsurvivable?
What if I'm not doing anything that's
Side
unsurvivable?
of the eye. What if right now I'm not doing anything that's unsurvivable?
What if right now I'm not doing anything that's unsurvivable?
Under the nose. Whew. That's a relief to part of me.
That's a relief to part of me.
Chin. It doesn't help my yearning,
It doesn't help my yearning.
collarbone, but it's definitely relief to the part of me that wants to survive.
It's definitely relief to the part of me that wants to survive.
I can have the yearning
I can have the yearning
without feeling all the threat,
without feeling all the threat,
without feeling like I must not be doing this right.
without feeling like I must not be doing this right.
That primal feeling.
That primal feeling.
Like that was a little shakeout authentically. The primitive brain, as it starts releasing, you may feel your body do a little something. Um, at first, when I was doing tapping, I didn't do that. I was still pretty suppressed about like letting my body do something weird, especially on camera. But now for the, it's, I understand that my primitive brain holds attention. It wants to know, it wants to be soothed. So this is something that um, is is a core feature of the be calm part of it. Our primitive brain will trigger over situations, alerts, changes in energy. It could be that it picks up some energy passing a mile away, it or on your Twitter feed or something like that,
Or
and it
something
goes
from your childhood.
isolated. And what it wants to know is that we're not doing anything that is actually a threat to our immediate survival. That's the primal imperative, immediate survival. Okay. Now we can have a yearning for more connection. We can have a yearning that maybe we're closer to the people that we're sharing a space with than we actually feel, but immediate threat to our survival. Um, Once we actively calm that, you can find that you can go from it taking 30 minutes for you to calm down from that feeling to it calming actually quickly perceiving and 3 to 7 seconds. I'm serious. Like you can get savvy enough with the calm down of the immediate threat to your survival that you don't impact yourself for hours, days, weeks, months after.
One of the most powerful things I've found around that is to help identify the timeline. What is a timestamp on the loneliness, the isolation? And I think someone shared that they keep isolation and loneliness are they Venn diagram a lot. We can feel isolated emotionally, physically in different ways, and that loneliness comes up. But if we've had experiences when we were a small child, often there were traumas. Little kids trying to figure out the world. They were facing a lot of things. They like Adira, Rick's child, has an amazing. He's the most best parents ever. I want to just be adopted. Um, but I know that there's times she's confused or uncertain, and she knows this is more than her little self could figure out. So that can be traumatic, and we can get echoes of that now with back then. So if I can timestamp it and separate, oh, I am feeling a little bit of lonely right now. I'm feeling a little bit isolated right now. And it's reminding me of all those times that I haven't fully resolved when I was younger. If I can separate those two and discern the two, I can go, oh, there's this much to handle here, and I can take action There's healing to do there, comfort to give back there. But they're when they're in the same soup pot, so to speak, it can just feel, oh my God, I don't even know where to start. And it's just because they're all tangled together, I think.
Even though they can be really tied together.
Even though they can be really tied together.
And they were in my childhood.
And they were in my childhood.
Mm. I do want to address that sense of immediate threat,
I do want to address that sense of immediate threat,
that threat of isolation,
that threat of isolation,
and to calm that.
and to calm that.
Top of the head. Being isolated is a threat.
Being isolated is a threat.
Eyebrow. Being lonely sucks.
Being lonely sucks.
Side of the eye. Being isolated is a threat.
Being isolated is a threat.
Under the eye. They use that in prison.
They use that in prison as
No, no, it's
punishment.
considered torture.
It's considered torture.
Chin. And I want to be able to calm that threat.
And I want to be able to calm that threat.
Collarbone. It would be really useful.
That would be really useful.
Under the arm. I have a yearning for connection.
I have a yearning for
When
connection.
that's not met, I feel lonely.
When that's not met, I feel lonely.
And lonely sucks.
And lonely sucks.
Top of the head. But that's not an immediate threat to my survival.
That's not an immediate threat to my survival.
So trying that on, and that's part of our acknowledgement with the title is feeling isolated yet surprisingly calm and confident. Um, and I'm not trying to shift lonely to like being peacefully in solitude. You
That
can
can
do
happen.
that.
Yes.
You can if that's like, I am feeling lonely, I want connection right now. It totally sucks that I don't have it. And I have solitude. I'm not actually isolated in the sense that my immediate welfare is threatened. And so I can calm that part of me, the part of me that's like, are we isolated? Because we're feeling pretty intensely something. And it can be that, like, yeah, back then it was isolation. And in this story, so um, I think it was this morning, it might have been yesterday. Um, Adira suddenly had a need for her mother. Now, I was right there with her. I was fully present. She doesn't speak out, mama, but she has a certain look. She was feeling, her primitive brain was so struck by the isolation from her mother that when she cried, not only was her face just like in this horrible torture, but there was silence. She was so intensely feeling isolated that she couldn't actually make a noise. Silent scream, tap tap tap. Dad starts to cry because mom's not in the building. now now that is isolation to me. That's what it felt like. It's isolation from that which you really feel desperately in need for. And she's um, and it was triggered by something, some sensation. Who knows? It could have been a toothache. It could have been a pang of hunger. It could have been our heart. Just like I haven't touched base. Um, and if we coped with that, I'm tapping while I'm talking about this because, I have memory in my body of times when I had that, and um, the the connection wasn't available.
Yeah, it could
And
be as an
so,
adult too. Like that
yeah,
particular flavor
exactly.
of longing you have for that particular person, you can't get that.
And once it hits that, this is unnatural. So the primitive brain has a definition of what is natural. Um, like we we aren't spread out 3,000 miles away. Like Super Aunt Cathy would not be 3,000 miles away on FaceTime. Like just that would never happen. We would we would be together.
I think
We would
maybe
be
she
in the
thinks I'm
same.
just a two-dimensional being because we've never met in person.
So I'm hopeful that like I can feel my body going, ooh, oh, interesting, because we're touching on aspects of this very primal feeling. And I believe that tapping, when we bring awareness to this type of thing, and we use tapping with it, that we change our pathway. We give it um, the primal impulse can pass through and be recognized, and that's where we do work this way too. Not only does our primitive brain have a knee-jerk reaction, but it also passes it on. And if there's better information, it's like, oh, this is not an immediate threat. um,
Well, I think that you were talking about natural, and that really struck me. Someone shared that being in an elevator brings up this sense of isolation if there's nobody on with them, and even if there's a stranger, it feels safer. And I think we're not like our primitive brain did not evolve in a place where we get sealed into small steel containers and get driven up and down thousands of feet. Like our brain is like, this doesn't seem like a
this
good
is
idea.
not natural.
Why are we doing this again? Um, so like that, it's not. There's a anytime I do something that's new or like my survival brain thinks it's not safe, I want a buddy. I want someone like, okay, well, if I'm going to be stuck in the steel cage, at least there's somebody else there that can panic with me.
Karate chop. Even though there are things that are not natural,
Even though there are things that are not natural.
for my 100,000-year-old primitive brain,
For my 100,000-year-old primitive brain,
like elevators,
like elevators,
being stuck in traffic,
being stuck in traffic,
surrounded by strangers,
surrounded by strangers,
living alone.
living alone.
It's okay.
It's okay.
I send a signal to my primitive brain.
I send a signal to my primitive brain.
Eyebrow. It's actually okay.
It's actually okay.
Side of the eye. We've evolved.
We have evolved.
And the eye. This isn't an immediate survival threat.
This is not an immediate survival threat.
And even if we're stuck in the elevator,
Even if I were stuck in the elevator,
Jen, it's not the same.
it's not the same.
It's actually okay.
It's actually okay.
It would suck to be stuck in the
It
elevator.
would suck to be stuck in the elevator.
But people will come.
People will come. I have my cell phone too.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that aren't familiar to my primitive brain,
There are a lot of things that aren't familiar to my primitive
and
brain,
it will ask the question.
and it will ask the question.
Eyebrow. I want to be good at giving the answer.
I want to be good at giving the answer.
Side of the eye. That it's not an immediate threat.
It's not an immediate threat.
We don't have to activate that way.
We don't have to activate that way.
Unbeknownst, we don't have to be in terror.
We don't have to be in terror.
Chin, we don't have to freeze.
We don't have to freeze.
Oh, that's so nice.
Oh, that's so nice.
I'm allowing that relief to reach all the primitive parts of me.
I am allowing that relief to reach all the primitive parts of me.
So, when talking to our body, allowing, inviting, these are words that researchers have found that I'm inviting every part of me or the primitive brain part of me to feel that sense of relief, that the okayness, or it would suck, but it's okay. It's kind of like if I went out hunting and I'm really, really hungry and no food comes home with me, that sucks. But we don't die in if we don't have food in a day. We don't. You know, there are some people that must that have particular conditions, but most of us are not.
I
Um,
think there's the fear can be very intense. Like Adira couldn't
yeah,
go. It would be very hard on her body. She's a 1 year old to go without food for a day. She'd survive, but it would be hard. Like she doesn't have the reserves some of us, more are more stored or not. But like I think for little kids, it's terrifying because they don't know. They don't have the experience that people go away and then eventually they come. It may be longer than we'd like. but usually somebody shows up or we can find a way to help ourselves.
Hmm.
So, like, a lot of us form that fear of isolation very intensely. If we had caregivers that were overwhelmed, or just like for Adira, Mama had to go see a client, and that's okay. She'll be back in a couple hours, but that feels like forever when you're one, probably. I know it feels like forever sometimes when I'm 53. Like, no, not 2 hours. I want it
Yeah.
now.
So, yes, the airplane fear, the fear of being cut off, isolated, um, and there's some messages in the chat about wanting this to be a permanent thing. I will tell you from my own experience that if you take whatever feelings of isolation and cut offness that are arising in other circumstances and you use this, I have this feeling, this reaction, and it's okay. It's not an immediate threat. This is an evolutionary upgrade. It's okay. Me being alone in this house, even on a holiday, it's actually okay. It's even, my choice because I could leave. I'm not in solitary confinement. Um,
I think looking for the control, where do we have control too? Our survival brain likes to have control.
yeah.
On an airplane, in an elevator, we don't have control over much. But like when I'm home alone, sometimes I'll change the temperature. I have a Alexa, and I will sometimes change the temperature up and down just a degree, just because it gives me a sense of like, oh, I'm reminding myself I have control of the environment. We can't do that in a plane or an airplane, but we could like, oh, I can ask for a glass of water. I can eat some nuts if that helps me. What do I have control over? Because when we're on a plane or an elevator, it's someone else, the technology or whoever built it is kind of in control. We're not able to like, oh, I feel like stretching out here, moving to a different seat unless it's really empty, or changing the temperature, or flying at a different height. It's small control things. It's a good trauma release is to look for little things, simple choices that we can do that we can control. Like, what corner of the elevator do I want to stand in? Do I want to push all the buttons or just three of the buttons?
Because it's a primitive brain, if you give it words, like I spent 6 months taking anything that made me anxious, isolated, whatever, and just including in the setup statement. And I've decided to be calm and confident anyway, or it's okay. I'm in the process of becoming calm and confident anyway. Yeah. Even though this scares me to the point that I'm almost shaking. Yeah, I'm open to being absurdly calm and confident right now. But it's all around calm and confident. And guess what? That has conditioned. There's a really nice superhighway inside of me, in my core energy, in my primitive brain, and my reactions, that if I tap my collarbone and it's like calm and confident, I have conditioned my my system to respond that way. I did not go out and do the scariest thing I could possibly imagine. I took the things that just came day by day by day. So, like, I walk into the barn and the horse I want to ride does this little, I'm like, I just stopped and tapped for like 10 minutes until I felt calm and confident. I didn't ride the horse that day because he was being an asshole. But I, in, instead of being in primitive brain at that point, taught myself. And isolation, like Cathy said, we're entering a period of time, at least in the northern hemisphere. Days are getting darker still until the 21st. Um, there's a holiday season. A lot of us are not going to be connecting the same way still. Um, and so when these feeling isolated, and we do something actively, and look, most of us, most humans I know feel isolated at times, even even the most extroverted and connected people that have people around, because it's a primitive brain kind of awareness. And if we get the feeling, we become aware of where it starts, and even when it gets triggered and it's intense, and we start doing something as part of the reaction, like tapping your collarbone and going, "Oh, feeling isolated, open to feeling calm and confident anyway," or as well. Um, this has made such a difference in my life. It's helped me navigate times of loss and isolation, and turn them into something that has been, as we're going to get to after the break, um, the the feeling of opportunity when we're in that place to actively get clarity, evolve, even
Follow,
exercise some of our energetic
follow the
and spiritual
longing.
gifts.
To follow the longing as a compass, because there are certain things often we can have the fears. Our survival brain wants to be in control. It wants certain things, but I do think there's also guidance in it. There's wisdom and intuition of like the certain way that that nutrition of connection would be good for us. And when we get really clear on it, it lets us short circuit a path to that rather than having to wander around like eating a lot of different berries. When if we can follow that longing in, if we can tolerate being with that discomfort for a little bit, to understand what is it particularly that I'm looking for, and then we can start doing things to create that more in our life. And if we have blocks to that, we have fears or things that block us, we're really clear that there's a goal we want to get to, and that lets us target the blocks much more clearly and get them out of our way so we can start. We're not just wandering around the plains hoping we find something to eat. We're like, no, I really would like this kind of berry, and I know that grows over there, and I want to get rid of the fear of going across the creek so I can get there, to make a silly analogy.
So I'd like to do, just checking the chat,
Oh,
um,
the permanent?
the permanent. Um, and so like if your childhood was filled with no bond, had no bonding, no healthy attachment, it really was a world of barren isolation. uh, then what I'm drawn to is the same thing that I'm using for myself who didn't have that. It's like, this is not an immediate threat to my survival. It's and proof you've survived. And I believe that the yearning loneliness part may is the more fruitful energy as a whole bodied experience, and the isolation. And again, I don't know, for anyone out there, um, it is one of the most unnatural things. For example, there's no time in human history until really my lifetime of the last decades where women have lived alone ever. So for example, it just wasn't something that you didn't live like Cathy. You don't have any roommates, or you're not in a family complex.
I don't think
uh,
anyone did. Men also lived with their, all genders lived with their families or in some kind of group.
but it was not as uncommon. And you see this in apes, and you see this in lions and a lot of other mammals. um, I'm saying this from my experience that, um, for women that physically live in their own space, it has often been a really more challenging issue for their primitive brain than the men who live alone in their own space. That's just been my experience over 20 years. Because because male bachelors and others have often lived on
Maybe
their
it's more
own.
socially acceptable or there's more role modeling for it, maybe.
It's mammalian. Like, male apes can go off on their own.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know that they're happy about it though. They're
no,
always
they
looking.
want to mate. They want to be in. Yeah,
They want to
exactly.
try to get back in. They're kicked out. They don't like it. Um,
Where you and I are not far apart on that. I just want to acknowledge that it's been it is a challenge when
I just want to say that women are just as capable of being unhappily isolated as men. Thank you very much.
okay,
I'm
even though all humans are capable of being unhappily isolated,
even though all humans are capable of being unhappily
it
isolated,
doesn't really matter about our gender.
it doesn't really matter about our gender.
And it doesn't even matter if we're living with other humans.
It doesn't even matter if we're living with other humans.
The isolation can feel really pervasive.
The isolation can feel very pervasive.
This isolation has felt really pervasive.
This isolation has felt really pervasive.
It's a big deal for me.
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 It's a really big deal for me.
It's a really big deal for
My
me.
primitive brain is really keyed to it.
My primitive brain is really keyed to it.
And I have a lot of yearning that's unmet too.
And I have a lot of yearning that's unmet too.
Be nice not to be triggered.
It'd be nice not to be triggered.
The yearning itself sucks.
The yearning itself sucks.
The unmet yearning really sucks.
The unmet yearning really
But
sucks.
I'm not doing something wrong.
But I'm not doing something wrong. Could I just lead into a little? And I was teasing when I crossed my arms and said women. I was trying to be funny.
Oh, yeah, it was accurate.
Okay. Um, could I just lead it about the permanent thing? Because I think that that can get really stuck in our system. And if it feels okay, tap along if you want to, take care of yourself. If you just want to listen or tune out for a minute if that's too intense for you. But I think that we can kind of get kind of log jammed in it. And sometimes just being with the feeling of what is can be powerful about releasing it. So, karate chop, even though this feeling of isolation feels permanent,
Even though this feeling of isolation feels permanent,
it is never going to change.
it is never going to change.
I've had it my entire life,
I've had it my entire life,
and I think it's stuck in my system.
and I think it's stuck in my system.
I'd really like something different,
I would really like something different,
and I'm afraid I can't have it.
and I'm afraid I can't have it.
Top of the head, the permanence of this isolation.
The permanence of this isolation.
Eyebrow, my nervous system is stuck in isolation mode.
My nervous system is stuck in isolation mode.
Side of the eye, I really want something different.
I really and truly want something different, a different feeling.
Under the eye, and it feels terrifying to try to reach for that.
And it feels terrifying to try to reach for that.
Under the nose, every time I've reached in the past.
Every time I've reached in the past,
Chin, I've ended up hurt.
I've ended up hurt.
Collarbone, so it feels safer to protect myself.
It feels safer to protect myself
Under the arm, and end up in permanent isolation.
and end up in permanent isolation,
Top of the head, even though I long for connection.
even though I long for connection.
Eyebrow, what if I did it differently this time?
What if I did it differently this time? I
Side
don't
of
know
the
what
eye.
differently is.
Yeah, side of the eye. I may not know what
I
differently
may
is.
not know what differently is.
Under the eye, but I can follow my longing like a compass.
I can follow my longing like a compass
Under the nose, and discover new ways to connect with people.
and discover new ways to connect with people.
Chin, I'm connecting differently with myself right this minute.
I'm connecting differently with myself this minute
Collarbone, by being with this fear that the isolation is permanent.
by being with this fear that the isolation is permanent.
Under the truth is a deep way to connect.
The truth is a deep way to connect.
Top of the head, and my courage in admitting this is very powerful.
And my courage in admitting this is very powerful.
It might open new doors.
It might open new doors.
Just take a breath and notice that. And if that is something that's coming up for you, just notice that it's a fear, it's a thought. It's not, that doesn't make it real. When we keep trying the same things over and over again, sometimes we end up with the same thing we've always had. And when we tap and clear the fears in our survival brain, we don't repeat the patterns. I had a rescue cat that was so scared if I looked at her, she'd run into the wall head first. Like she would just panic and run into the wall and hurt herself. And it took a long time, but after a while, like I would walk through the room like not looking at her so she wouldn't run into the wall. But after a while, it was Chick-fil-A actually, which I didn't know was a bad thing back in those days. But she would eat Chick-fil-A with me, and she became my buddy, and she would cuddle with me. And like there was a difference, but she had to get out of that knee-jerk reaction, that neural pathway that said people are scary, just run wherever you can. Which honestly, I lived a lot of my life that way, where I was just trying to get away from people because they were so scary. And if you look at the people that are here, whether you're watching now or later, there's a lot of warm, smiling faces and people that aren't scary, that we don't have to run into walls to get away from. So maybe it's about discerning which people are safe to connect with and how we want to connect, rather than, oh, I'm really bad at this. Maybe I was with a bunch of people that weren't good at connecting early when I was young either. So I never learned how to do it really well. I don't know if that. It just
Thank you.
I want people to not run into walls when they see people they want to connect with.
We're going to pause the recording here and take a 7 minute break to the top of the hour. If you're on listening to the recording, we invite you to as well, to tend to yourself, to allow your state of being to be recognized, and anything that your body's asking for, anything that you may want to write down, reflect on for a moment, and we'll be back.
Yeah, I'll be monitoring the chat.
Welcome back. Ah.
This is an intense topic, and yeah, thank you for being here and being willing to dive into this. I think it's important to acknowledge that this is not a simple thing to jump into.
Mhm. Our primitive brain can go off and try to explain um, the feeling. It goes with, I'm not doing this right, or else I wouldn't be isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Excommunication, being cast out of
Punished.
the tribe was a really big deal. It happened very rarely, as far as I've ever read in indigenous cultures. Um, and so, to be isolated, we can look at, like, what are the primal things. Well, I'm of no status. That's where we get this feeling like I'm not good enough or I'm worthless. To me, that is can be a logical explanation for something that's a primitive feeling. Oh, I'm sick. And so they're really like, i'm I'm not an equal member of the tribe. That I've fallen below the bottom rung of who you have to be a member of the tribe. Um, and we could spend a lot of time talking about the cultural catastrophe that has put so many of us who have various things that leave us feeling isolated. Um, but chronic illness is one of them. And so I'd like to at least do a round or two on
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, when I was chronically ill, I fell into that feeling like I was less than the healthy people around me. And so I I believe that one of the reasons why I was dying was that I no longer felt like I was connected, even though there were people around me that loved me, that were even doing some things for me. That feeling of isolation, I wish I had had this time together with you all, where I could, like, oh, the isolation feeling, um, maybe I can shift that, even though I've got, and if it's not true for you, you can say something else that might be true, or refer to other people that have chronic illness and pain. Even though I have chronic illness and pain,
Even though I have chronic illness and pain.
and that really triggers feelings of isolation.
And that really triggers feelings of isolation.
and I've tried to figure it out.
And I've tried to figure it out.
And I'm open to calming myself.
I am open to calming myself.
I'm not the same as someone who's perfectly healthy,
I'm not the same as someone who's perfectly
but
healthy.
who's perfectly healthy?
Who is perfectly healthy?
Do I know anyone who's perfectly healthy?
Do I know anyone who's perfectly healthy? I know a lot of people pretend to be perfectly healthy.
Uh, top of the head. I feel isolated by my illness.
I feel isolated by my illness,
Eyebrow. And it is isolating.
and it is isolating.
I would do more things if I wasn't ill.
I would do more things if I wasn't
Under the
ill.
eye. I would do more things if I wasn't in pain.
I would do more things if I wasn't in pain.
Nose. I would connect more if I wasn't scared.
I would connect more if I wasn't scared.
Chin. I'm open to feeling less disconnected.
I'm open to feeling less disconnected.
Hold on. What if there's more going on here that I could tap into?
What if there's more going on here that I could tap into?
What what do I value about myself?
What do I value about myself?
That is part of my connection to
That,
humanity.
that is part of my connection to humanity. I think that too, when I'm in pain, like I had a rough night last night, so my body's a little achy. I notice I don't let in, and this is not to blame people that feel isolated in any way, but it's just an invitation. Sometimes I don't let in the gentle nourishment as well as I love my coffee, the warmth of it. And I noticed today it was harder for me to let it in because I was feeling a little tired and achy and just a little off, as opposed to like, oh, am I letting my body be fulfilled by the things that do bring me pleasure, even if I'm not feeling great today? Like, oh, this coffee is warm. I'm here with people I love. I have an electric blanket that I put over my legs when I sit at my desk for a while. I think that sometimes I'm curious about you, but like when I'm in pain or I don't feel well, I kind of close in and kind of put a little shell around myself and to protect myself, but then I'm not also letting in the nurturing, the things that could help me feel a little more fulfilled and connected. So just something when we were doing that tapping that I noticed.
Would you like to lead a tapping on being open,
Yeah, and then we
a little
can,
more open within
yeah,
the isolation feeling?
I think that would be a good segue into the longing, following the longing.
Yeah.
Karate chop. Even though sometimes it's hard to open up,
Even though sometimes it's hard, really hard to open up,
especially if I'm hurting emotionally or physically.
especially if I'm hurting emotionally or physically.
I don't want to let the nice things in
I don't want to let the nice things in
because I feel all curled up and protective.
because I feel protective.
Top of the head, but I really long for those nice
I
feelings.
really long for that, those comforts.
Eyebrow, can I let in a little bit more comfort?
And I let in a little more comfort.
Side of the eye, even 3% more would be lovely.
Even 3% more would be lovely,
Under the eye, or 1%.
or 1%.
Under the nose, can I let my survival brain know I'm safe enough to let in a little of the comfort around me?
Am I safe enough to know, to let my primitive brain know? Try again. I lost it.
Can I let my survival brain know it's safe to let in a little bit of the comfort?
Can I let my survival brain know that it's safe to let in some of the comfort?
Jen, just a little trickle.
No! What?
Just a little trickle.
Just a little trickle?
Collarbone. Maybe that's too scary.
And maybe that can be too scary.
Under the arm. I'm doing the best I can right now.
I'm doing the best I can right now.
Top of the head. And I can just notice the resistance
I can just notice the resistance,
or allow in a little bit more if that works.
allow in a little bit more if that works.
So just take a deep breath and like sometimes just being with the resistance, like when we're pretending we want to let it in and we're just kind of ignoring it. I think that's hard to shift it, but sometimes just being with the resistance and not trying to shift it, just like, no, I'm not going to do this. All of a sudden, that kind of processes through, that energy processes through, and sometimes we can let more in at that point. So even if you can't, just notice what you're feeling and notice that your body's trying to keep you safe. It doesn't feel safe about letting new energies in right now. That's okay. You look
So,
thinking, I didn't want to interrupt you.
pardon me?
You look like you're thinking, so I didn't want to interrupt you. But
Yeah, I'm
you talked about
feeling
belonging.
like um, so when I was healing, there was a shift that happened, particularly related to isolation. So when I was in a lot of pain and curled up in pain, um, there was a feeling of that of isolation, and the way that my I'm going to articulate this may not have been exactly how it happened, I'll just say, but I had such a strong yearning in my heart for someone strong enough to just let me rest my head in their lap. And the and I can remember where I was and that sense that yes, there is. And I had quieted the isolation down enough through meditating, following my breath, just following my breath in and out. So if the isolation was like at a 10 trillion, I calmed it down to the point where I was aware of my breath, was doing my meditation practice, and the yearning was, I need someone to let me rest my head in their lap. And I felt it. So the yearning led me to a sensation in my body, which, as far as I don't have any recollection um, of it happening in my physical world, like really as an adult, resting your head in someone's lap. Um, there's something very intimate and healing about that for me. And um, I've noticed in my life that if I follow the yearning and I am open to the idea that it can be met without it being a physical, like flesh and blood person to be the first to kind of be the breakthrough, that it has pierced the sense of isolation. Um, that goes with a buddy to talk to. You know, before Cathy showed up in my life, I didn't have a buddy that I talked to every day, ever. Um, and I still have a strong yearning. And so it's very intimate for me to share that in the non-physical space, in the connection space, that I'm aware that there are there's a lot more resource available than I ever was taught or felt growing up. Um, and it doesn't always have to take the form that was part of your spiritual upbringing or education. And for me, it didn't and hasn't uh, all the time. And so it's like before I really wanted to do tapping with people, I was doing tapping on my own. I felt very isolated in it. I didn't have anyone to tap with. And after meditating, I imagined like what I really yearned for is someone just to tap with that that would help both of us. And
Really.
people, I've shared this story before, that I felt person after person after person after person from some dimension, some place on earth. It felt like sometimes both um, would uh, would be present. And in that, I believe that one of the reasons spirituality has been a huge part of human experiences is that feeling energetically isolated is also a really difficult thing for our core to feel isolated energetically. Um, As a parent of two adult children, there's an energetic connection. If I start feeling isolated from them, the call is not to just pick up the phone. That rarely works. Um, the call is to energetically, like, there's a love between us that it doesn't depend on physical proximity. That does not actually address the yearning to actually be face to face with
I think
Jimmy and
that's so
Rebecca,
good
but
night.
it does address the sense of isolation from them.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's so important because I have this experience. I'll point fingers at myself, but I also have clients that have talked about where there's like they're trying to it's they're like trying to climb up somebody to get away from their feelings of isolation or their sad feelings versus being really calmly present with them, knowing that they can handle their own sense of loneliness. There's a different energy of like, oh, I'm going to be really happy and kind of fawny. And I, I call it climbing up someone, trying to get away from your feelings versus I can stand here with my feet on the ground, knowing that I can be lonely sometimes and I'm still okay and I'm choosing to connect. And I like to remember there was a woman who was there. It was in the 1800s, but she lived on an island by herself. It was right off the coast of California. She lived there for I think 20 years by herself. There were no other humans, and I imagine that's really hard. But it reminds me we can actually adapt. Humans can adapt, and even though we require some touch and food, and there's things we need, we can actually adapt and learn to live that way. We're not going to die despite our primitive brain. Usually, we're not going to die. And I want to reach out and connect with people from a point of strength and stability, not from I need to get away from this loneliness or this isolation. So I love what Rick said about just like connecting in his heart and feeling like connecting with himself and the love for those people as a starting point rather than just trying to like I'm feeling alone, my brain is panicking, I want to run away from that. So and I wanted to make sure we talk a little bit about following the longing. Is that okay, Rick? If we go in there, I used to try to run away from those feelings. I would distract. There's still days I do. It's been, especially the last 2 years, but when we can be with the feelings and start to just not feel this massive like fear, but start to notice what it is particularly we're longing for. When we can build up a muscle little bits at a time to actually be with the longing and ask ourselves, what in particular do I want in this moment? We've like often that sense of longing will initially come on to me as very strong and it's almost a panic of wanting to run away. It's like, I don't like this feeling, I want to make it stop. But if I can breathe into it and notice what is it particularly I want. Sometimes it's a particular person, like a deer wanting her mama. And there's times when I'm like, I really want to talk to Rick. Like that is the perfect nutrient for me right now. And there may not be times when that's available. So it's like, what about that would be really nurturing? It's a warm, kind, understanding person that loves me. Okay, maybe there's somebody else that I could get some of the nutrients from. Or maybe it's a sign that I need to deepen my bench in terms of friends that I have that I'm close with. But if I can if once I know the flavor of what I'm looking for, once I know what I want to experience, one, getting past the blocks that might be stopping me becomes easier because I have a goal that I'm working for. And two, finding it once I get past some of those blocks, I know what I'm looking for. I know where I want to create. So even if you don't have anyone in mind, like I hate when there's like my life feels very rich right now. I have a number of people that I really love and I'm getting support from. And I can support back sometimes, but there have been times when there was no one really drawing me. And it felt very isolated. Like I was like, where are the bright shiny lights in my world? And so what I would do is try to look for what would I look for if I did have them. What would I like them to be like? What would I like the experience to be like? And I do think that that helps us too. And so we're starting to look for that in the world, and whether we attract it or we just start noticing it when the universe drifts it by us. I think using that longing as a compass can be really powerful. It's a way to take something that is not very fun and kind of I love transforming muck into gold. There is a direction in that longing. There is a what is it specifically that I want to have? And then I have a lot more power about creating it versus I just want to run away from this feeling. Does that make sense, Rick? Did I explain that well?
Yeah. And for me, I would just, I, I'm saying this for the me that's, 30 years ago. It's okay to imagine it. That's something that is a core part of, for me as a relational person, um, to notice the flavors of it. Like as soon as I started noticing that there was comfort available in that non-physical spiritual form, I started noticing and letting in more of my dog. Like, oh, she just came and rested her head in my lap. I think right now I'm feeling that kind of like completing the loop of me resting my head in
And
the
someone
lap.
else's lip.
And
Oh,
now my dog has come and rested their head in my lap. And oh, I want to be carried. Oh, the feeling of being held and carried. And now I'm riding a horse who's carrying me. What's up with this?
I
Yeah.
I think that if we dig down, the experience sounds it sounds to me, Rick, like you would like some support. You'd like other people to be, because I know with your family, you do a lot of the lifting. It's like, oh, what do those kind of symbolize? They symbolize somebody else, offering support and being there for you. And that's, you know, while you may not find a course to ride this week, you can look for different ways the universe supports you, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, that's a
Hmm.
thought that came.
So I'd like to just lead a tapping of particularly like I have not seen my adult kids in 2 years in person. Um, and so like immediately when I tune to that, there's a sense of like I it's still there. I'm not doing this right. It's only about a 4 right at the moment, but that flared up.
With the holidays,
Um, and so I'm gonna just kind of step us through how I might, do some tapping on that, even though I have such a strong feeling right now.
even though I have such a strong feeling right now,
I really want to be with them.
I really want to be with
I
them.
want to be with them for the holidays.
I want to be with them for the holidays.
And that is not going to happen.
That is not going to happen.
This feels really unnatural.
This feels really
And
unnatural.
I feel it in my throat and my heart.
And I feel it in my throat and my heart.
I feel how unnatural this is.
I feel how unnatural this is.
I feel it in my throat and heart.
I feel it in my throat and my heart.
Side of the eye. Part of me is asking, is something wrong?
Part of me is asking, is something wrong?
Under the eye. And it's the way it is.
And it's the way it is.
Under the nose. It's an unwanted reality.
It's an unwanted reality.
Chin, I wish they lived next door.
I wish they lived next door.
They definitely do not live next door.
They definitely do not live next door.
And they're both okay.
And they're both okay.
And I'm okay.
And I'm okay.
And there is a love that connects us.
And there is a love that connects us.
And I'm choosing to become more aware of that.
And I'm choosing to become more aware of that.
I let this yearning be a call to that.
I let this yearning be a call to that.
Hi, guys.
Hey guys,
Love you.
love you.
I I have shared this over the 20 years I've been coaching with others who have sometimes estrangement with family members, and yet there is a love that they feel. Uh, there is a sense of connection, and to go to a place where energetically within, um, I love the energy of a circle, meeting them as humans, not necessarily even always as mom and dad. And it's happened enough times that people have said, I feel the relationship that I have with them changing. I
Mm-hmm.
feel it becoming more nourished. I feel alive inside of me a greater love that isn't as tinged with the intense yearning for something that isn't. And I've also known in my life and heard it reflected, not every time, but enough times, that when people do reconnect, that there's less of a sense of a gap, that there's a sense of continuity that's possible. When we're isolated from one another energetically, um, and consciously, like, oh, I'm isolated, I don't feel like there's as much movement of energy in the relationship. Um, Cathy and I haven't seen each other for nearly 2 years as well.
It never
And yet,
happens. It's
and
like,
yet, she's a part of my walk. She's not actually on my walk, but she's a part of my walk. She was today. There was this really, really cool place where there was mountain laurel and pine trees and pine needles, and it was soft and wonderful. And I felt your presence. Now, to me, that is a way that I actively keep the relationship so that it is, and I do that. It happens more and more. And that I believe is, for me, one of the signals that the part of me that is primal, that also had telepathic and other connections with my tribe and those that I love, that intuitive, we for a while we just called it mother's intuition, but we are coming to understand that we as humans have an intuition, a connection that can give us information about each other and with each other and nourish each other, and that our yearning in our isolation, we can tap tap. It's not an immediate threat.
yeah,
And
conversation.
how might this yearning guide me in deepening my awareness, my connection to the people that are oriented the way that I am, the people that these are the things that matter, that circle and community and connection and love and healing and acceptance to people that are wherever they are on their illness and well-being spectrum, you know, whether you're partnered or not, whether you're part of a, a pod or not. Um, we can connect and accept and include each other in our energy. And that's a powerful sense of healing that wound of isolation. Well,
And I will sometimes use that longing to help myself. I think one of the things people do is we let appreciations, like when I'm longing for a particular person, I kind of hold my breath. It's almost like I just kind of freeze in place. And one thing I've learned that helps me is if I think of, I tap on an appreciation I have for them and a resentment that I have for them. So the next time we're together, like old appreciations can get stale, just like old resentment. So like when I feel that longing, I'll tap on something I appreciate and really try to feel it and like freshen that energy and let anything old perceptions go. And then I'll tap on a resentment I have for them. And if I want to do another appreciation, another resentment, what I'm trying to do is use that energy to clear the pathway so the next time I meet them, I'm in a really open space where they get to be them, I get to be me, and we have more opportunity. The place we're meeting is not filled with big boulders or rocks so that we can just actually meet a little better. We don't always have control, especially with COVID. It makes it harder, holidays, travel. We don't always have the option on what we can do, but as we were talking about in the chat, there's usually something we have control over. So it might be, I can't reach out to that person right now because they're in a different time zone and they're sound asleep. I could write them a nice note, or I could listen to their voicemail. I've done that with Rick before, like just hearing his voice, like, oh, okay, he's there still. Or I might do some tapping and like, oh wow, that was so cool that he did that the other day. Oh, and I wish he hadn't said it. I wish he hadn't had to go for dinner. I was just enjoying our conversation. Whatever I tap and clear, it creates more pathway and more ease. So sometimes using the pain as a way to invite yourself to clear things out I mean, it's not going to hurt you in any way. And you might find the next time you connect, you're like, oh, wow, there is more clarity here. There's more open space for us to just be here together. So, just a thought. I'd rather use it than sit there and hold my breath and feel awful.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community. We'd love to continue the engagement with you. We have a couple of invitations. We have the Thriving Now circles at thrivingnow.com/circle. We have other calls where they're not recorded and we engage one-on-one and as a community, as a group around these particular subjects and whatever else is coming up for you. Um, and we also have our community center, which is free, thrivingnow.center. And that's an opportunity. The replay and um, the invitations to these events are posted there. We invite you to share your ahas, your questions, and like, this didn't work for me, and where I'd like to go with this is here. What is your what is your asking, your intuition, your guidance? So thank you, Cathy.
Well,
And
thank you all for being here. I really
mhm,
value the courage everybody brings to these and the vulnerability. I feel much less alone. So thank you.
yeah, thank you. Bye for now.
Talk to you soon.